Sounds good.
Hello, everybody. Oh man, I got partway through this lecture before realizing I wasn't even sharing the screen, so we're starting it all over again. That happens. I only have an audience of one today, my friend Joel Franusic, who might decide to ask a question partway through, but I have him in the audience so that I'm not just lecturing to a thumbnail of myself, which is a weird thing to do. So often we start our lectures with some opening music. We're not doing that today because we're going to be following up on somebody who provided the opening music for lecture 2, an artist named Silverspook. So let's jump, and this lecture is going to be about authoring Indigenous games or making games as an Indigenous person. For a little bit of context, this is not quite the normal thing that we do in this class. This is an optional pre-recorded lecture for a class called Data Structures for Interactive Media at UC Santa Cruz. We often do a lot of live programming and occasional profiles of artists for additional context in the class. We're kind of inverting that today to talk mostly about the artists. There will be some code, but we're not going to write it. It's going to be a strange, interesting language. Our normal lecture session today is canceled so that students have more time to work through their take-home exam at home. And if you're in the class, remember, you can still come to our normal lecture session time today to get help on your exam as if it were office hours or something like that. But more likely, if you are a random person in the future or on the internet, maybe I'm going to post this on YouTube, I'm not sure. Feel free to use my email address on screen to email me if you want some more context for where this video came from. Okay, let's launch into authoring Indigenous games. So you may or may not know that, I don't know exactly the date today, Indigenous Peoples Day was fairly recently. Indigenous Peoples Day is this event that we've recognized here in the city of Santa Cruz for a long time, well, since 1994. However, it didn't become like a US federal national holiday until a few weeks ago. So I don't know, maybe next year we'll decide to cancel class for this, but it wasn't a holiday yet this time. And I believe that November that we are in now is also Native American Heritage Month, at least in the US way of organizing things. So that's a little bit about Indigenous people. What's the connection to games and interactive media? Let me switch topics to talking about this news post from UCSC a couple years ago, 2013. Headline was, UC Santa Cruz hires game industry veterans to run professional degree program. We hire these big names, Brenda Romero, John Romero, to teach and run our professional master's program in games and playable media. And so, good for us for hiring big names to help run our program, but what's the connection to Indigenous people? Let's find out who these people are. So over on the left, John Romero, who maybe in the back of your head, you have an association with Doom and first-person shooters. He associates with the Yaqui and Cherokee tribes. He grew up in Arizona. And his wife, Brenda Romero, or previously known as Brenda Braithwaite, has Irish heritage, and that gets reflected in her games. So a few days ago, John tweeted, I guess on actually Indigenous Peoples Today, it's Indigenous Peoples Day in the US. My heritage is a critical part of who I am, where I come from, and how I think about design, how I think about design and playable spaces. I'm wishing all of my fellow native devs and gamers a great day today. I have some links if you want to learn a little bit more about their art. I'm not sure how I'm going to give out these slides. If it's a YouTube video, maybe I'll put it in the description. But just so you don't have to click on these things now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of Brenda's projects, a little bit of John's projects, and we'll spend most of the time talking about someone else. So focusing first on Brenda's things, she has made a lot of games. In fact, she made a series of board games about like difficult parts of history that are not treated well by kind of elementary school education stuff. So connecting to her Irish heritage, she made this game called Shilkan Lat or Shilkan Leet. I'm not very good with Irish. She says, Shilkan Lat is the story of my family's history, beginning with the Cromwellian invasion of Ireland. So this was around the year 1650, the English, I guess, reinvaded Ireland. They had done it before. So this is a game about that difficult time from the Irish perspective. So maybe it's appropriate the game doesn't have an English name because it's kind of weird to translate the game from the English perspective. So she's putting her people and her culture into the story and the mechanics and even the materials of this particular game design. This is a board game, so it's not so easy for me to share with you right now. We're going to spend most of the time talking about digital games. And not all Indigenous games are like retellings of your people's stories. There's much more subtle ways these things get involved. That second link that I put on the bottom here, that's a 1-hour panel video with John Romero and some other people and their struggles in the game industry. To give you a summary of that, it looks like this. We've got 4 people talking to each other. In the bottom left, we've got John Romero, associated with id Games, who kind of launched the whole genre of shooter games, from which things like COD Blops Cold War came, as well as new games like Umurangi Generation, which is a first-person shooter in a photography shooter sense. And that game just won the Seamus McNally Grand Prize at IGF 2021. So that's a big deal in the indie games world. So in this video, John talks a little bit about how his games aren't like retellings of how he grew up in Arizona, but there are certain aspects of his identity and his perspective that leak into the jokes that get made, into, there's a lot of great stuff in the video. Tali Faulkner talks about, I'm not going to try to summarize the whole video now, just to connect things. I think Miranda Dew is a producer at Treyarch and has worked on the Cold War game, but we're going to spend most of our time talking about this guy, Chris Miller, his game in the background, Neo Feud, who he is, and what is this maybe unfamiliar flag hanging in the background while he's on this stream here. So to give you a sense of what Chris's game Neo Feud is, we're going to watch the trailer. We're going to have some flashing lights and some violence and some digitally pixel animated self-harm stuff. Feel free to skip ahead if you want. Let me just change the settings here so that we can optimize screen share for video clip. And we do want audio, but about halfway. So we'll watch this 2.5-minute trailer for a game.
The Illuminati created us. They wanted to build a god with their own hands, and instead they created us.
Just because I'm made of silicone and aluminium, I must be doing something wrong. That's machine stereotyping, that is.
That's reality, that is. Machines are second-class citizens.
Humans are sentient persons by default, ma'am. They have personhood by heredity.
There are thousands upon thousands of overqualified slum dwellers. You are my peon. Don't you get it?
This wasn't a job. It was always just an excommunication sentence.
We're pawns in a feud bigger than we can imagine. Turn the cogs of the machine before Leviathan grinds you up and swallows you and yours.
We don't get to choose our hand, comrade. Prince, peon, rich, poor, human, robot.
I invented the crux of the royal's power, the secret to consciousness, our existence itself, the meaning of life.
I'm the $6 billion baller, not some troubled youth.
You are my greatest creation of all.
God's had to build my own family. I hate your son. I hate your son.
I'm happy to smash all of the crowns and throw the gold shards down to the people. I will be the iconoclast queen.
But who makes you queen anyway? You? You and whose army, princess? You and whose army?
Okay, that was, I have to be careful not to like actually start playing the video again. Ah, we're safe. We escaped from it. Nope. Okay, now I'm going to turn off optimize for video. Were the audio levels okay for that? Okay. So you could get an idea from the trailer. How did I get out of full screen mode? Let's go back and do this again. You can get an idea from the trailer that this is like a, structurally, it's a point and click adventure game with high resolution digital painting art, voice acting, and so on. It's maybe not as polished as what you would expect from, I don't know, a game like Destiny or something with a $500 million budget. This is essentially one person's project. But at that level, it is actually very polished. So I'm going to describe what this game is and what it means to the person who made it, I'm mostly going to let Chris Miller here speak for himself by reading a piece of a Twitter thread. So he starts off saying, Neo-Feud is an anti-capitalist, anti-racist, anti-imperialist is cyberpunk. I'm a native Hawaiian who has made this game while working 40 plus hours in social services, teaching in ghettos while homeless. Neo-Feud is my life in art. Where's the rest of the thread? Oh, and briefly on his bio, when we've done artist profiles for other things, for other artists, I've often chosen artists. When we look at their bio, it says like programmer artist or artist programmer or technical artist, trying to say that like you can get to the level where you're expressing yourself through code and still be a legitimate artist. This person does not have like programmer anywhere in his bio. He is, I guess, well, we'll see it in his own words here. So yeah, Neo-Feud is my life in my art. Let's see if we can make this a little bit bigger. I often describe my work not as science fiction, but as stylized journalism with futuristic characteristics. The art and stories and gameplay of Neo-Feud are a direct reflection of my upbringing and experiences as a native Hawaiian STEM teacher for underserved youth of Honolulu's inner city. Teaching robotics, programming, and sustainability is often difficult, stressful, and even Kafkaesque endeavor. Being one of the richest and most beautiful places on earth, yet dealing with families and working parents who are living out of a van and sleeping on the street. It's hard to keep the kids out of the gangs, off drugs, and on a path towards better opportunities, such as the ones I had growing up in a slum area of paradise while going to an upscale private school, only because dad taught there and we got free tuition, which otherwise would have been $20,000 a year. Hawaii is known for its postcard Corona commercial scenery, not the current Corona, but it's not all fun and sun for everyone who actually lives there. I grew up a native Hawaiian on the not so nice side of the coconut trees where the tour buses avoid. My parents and parents' parents have lived in the poverty-stricken area of Kalihi Palama, cleaning for and teaching for and dancing the fake plastic hula for profit of the mostly white and foreign millionaires and billionaires Hawaii. I'm a third generation neo-feudal serf. So if you peel back the sort of sci-fi tropes of his games where there's, people with mechanical arms and hovering cars and so on, what he's trying to talk about is his life through this game, but packaging it in ways that you'll understand from other sci-fi things and actually poking fun at things. He's got like one of the characters is a sort of peace-loving hippie Terminator that still like looks like Terminator from Terminator movies. But there's lots of comedy in it as well as it at the same time as it being very serious stuff. Okay, now we're back. So if you find this guy out in the wild on Twitch, you might find him, working on the sequel game, Neo-Feud 2. He's got, and a point-and-click game involves lots of things, and importantly, it involves a lot of visual art. So he spends a lot of time in Photoshop. Here he is, extremely zoomed in, like making some repeating patterns of some larger thing that's just going to be a small detail in the background of the upcoming game. He's got zillions of layers that don't have the best names, but he knows that, then it's part of the joke. And then flying in the background of his stream is the Kanaka Maoli flag, which is, I think, informally the flag representing the native Hawaiian people, which is different than the Kingdom of Hawaii flag and so on. Look it up on Wikipedia if you want some more stuff. But it's sort of he's doing this from a native Hawaiian standpoint. And he's sort of, unlike other big game companies that try to keep all their stuff under wraps, he's sort of letting it all hang out there, showing you the rough building blocks as they're coming together over the years. And I thought this was a really cool way to see how somebody was working. So I asked him a question. I said, hey, I'm teaching this data structures class, and I'd love to be able to feature a segment because Indigenous Peoples Day is coming up. I didn't quite line up the times. Is there a way I could like get some of your like source files that I can show in class and talk through? And he's like, sure. Here's a link to a file on Google Drive. It's in a C#/Java sort of script. You'll probably be able to figure it out. So let's look at some of that. And I'll say, like, I have over here in another window, like, how do I drag it over? Can I not? Okay. I'll show you the raw source code in a moment. I'm going to, a bunch of the game is on YouTube, not enough to ruin the whole story, but, you know, like the first few chapters. So we're going to watch, I guess, just a few seconds of this particular scene.
Good afternoon, Mr. Carbon. Nice to see you.
Please, Carl is fine. May I come in?
Of course, make yourself at home.
Welcome, sir. Sorry if you had a hell of a time finding us.
Okay, so that was like a few seconds. That on YouTube, it's just a video. But at the level that that's assembled from in the game's assets, you can imagine we've got lots of detailed hand-painted art. We've got voice acting. We've got animations that play over time. So that video started with, I don't know how to make that part of the, oh good, that makes it go away. In this script file that Chris sent me that has, how long is it? It's just the script file for this one scene in the Silica family apartment, but it's like 1,200 lines of code. In it, there's a definition of a function called like room after fade in. So this code runs when this scene starts up. And one of the first things it checks is like, hey, have I already done an investigation? If so, like say, oh, welcome back. Otherwise, maybe we haven't done our investigation yet. So there's a different script where Suzette, this character here, says, you know, good afternoon, Mr. Carbon. Nice to meet you. Then there's more things that's sort of controlling the actors. It's like the ego character. I'm forgetting his name now, or Mr. something Carbon. This is setting him to like sort of normal. He's got many different faces that he can have with his dialogue. This is setting him to the normal face. And then he says, oh, please, Carl's fine. May I come in? And she says, of course. Then there's a sequence of code that animates the hippie Terminator guy. You can see he's got his little peace sign, but he's obviously looking like a Terminator there. And his name is Todd. Todd needs to go to position 9-5 and start playing this animation and continue. Wait 15 frames or 15 units, then play this pre-made animation called slide latch, where he like reaches out and like locks the door, and then the door will turn to a different graphic, and then we wait 20 more steps for that animation to finish. So what's being written here is a bit of like character name says dialogue. It's like a screenplay thing, but also the stuff that actors would figure out how to do their business is also expressed in this language. Question for Joel. Any guess what this language is?
Well, I mean, there's already a hint. He said like C# JavaScript like.
So it's probably not C# or Java. It's something like that. Any guess?
No, I mean, my first guess would be like Java because it looks Java-like. But since you're asking, I mean, maybe Lua.
Lua is a common game scripting language, but it's not that one.
Yeah, because I don't think Lua does the semicolons.
Lua doesn't have open and closing braces. It has like do and end things.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so an Algol.
It's like in the large family of languages, it's some cousin of something that's popular now.
Right.
It's it was a trick question. You weren't going to guess it. It's one called Adventure Game Script, specific to this particular game engine. But
interesting.
But we're still able to read it because it's like a descendant of all the the languages that we read on a daily basis all descend from kind of the same set of things. So we could probably create new scenes in this language, never having read the documentation for it,
right?
Because it's close enough.
Another thing I thought that's interesting is it says speech view. It's Carbon with a K. And that just reminds me of like, he's showing us the insides of his code where there's all kinds of, like if I was to show this code publicly, I would have probably renamed it so it's the same as everything. But this looks so familiar to me of like, yep, there's, the original spelling or somewhere something changed. And
and all these things like famous paintings in museums, when they like x-ray them, they find out whatever, like the Mona Lisa's face was different and it was repainted 6 times. Like the art you see as an audience, sometimes you can get access to the internal stuff to know, Carbon used to be spelled with a K. Suzette's name used to be something else or something like that. And it's fun to get those things.
Exactly.
So this was just one tiny thing where we've used this Boolean variable to branch here. We're going to look at another scene.
Good afternoon, Miss.
Nope, we're going to try to go to the next slide. That's what we're going to do. So for a little bit of context, like you're playing as the person who's the equivalent of Chris himself. You are this... can't quite see it under the play button. Mr. Carbon has like a cybernetic arm here, so he's not entirely human. He's part machine. The graphics are trying to say this guy's not normal in some sense. He works for this equivalent of like social services thing, and his job is to go do a like child protective services investigation in one of the scenes where he has to report like, is this a safe place to raise a child? And so we're going to see a little scene here where you are inspecting this apartment and you have to decide, like, make a bunch of choices. Like, does this baby have access to clean water? So in an adventure game, you like click on things to walk to them and interact with them. Go to that oil faucet there, Mr. Carbon. They've modified this tap to spout out oil instead of water. Sentient machines are hydrophobic for obvious reasons, but you can always use some automotive lubricant for the metal joints. Robo-arthritis is a bitch. Oh, why did I delay so long? They've got this sort of avant-garde interior design that's in a legal gray area, but no one's getting hurt here. So you have to choose. A major choice for the story is like, and things like, do I mark them as having clean access to water or not? Because you can imagine if you say no, this robotic family gets their robotic baby taken away. That's a big choice. So in the code, there's code that runs when you click on that faucet. It says, okay, Carl, you walk to position 933, 588, following the walkable areas, start facing to the left, and then display at the top of the screen this like internal monologue that this character is having. And if you haven't already looked at the faucet, then make the clipboard visible and do this like inventory update thing. So we've got our gameplay expressed here. This awkward moment where you have to make this important thing comes down to like, have I already set the Boolean variable to true? If not, go to the interaction where they might set the variable or not. That's how you make your choices have long-term consequences in this universe. I want my full screen back. I have to remember to use these little buttons down here. So Chris describes Neofeud as cyberpunk. We have cyberpunk novels, cyberpunk movies, cyberpunk movies, novels, games, obviously. So there's things like cyberpunk, the tabletop role-playing game, Deus Ex, the video game, the old and new Blade Runner things are all solidly within a cyberpunk thing. Even games, Joelle, you know this game, Endgame Singularity. For some context in this class, we had people read the source code to this game called Endgame Singularity and answer questions about the narrative of a game that they hadn't played at all. And in this game, you play as like an artificial intelligence that's trying to spread itself from server to server. Common to all these things is that there's main characters that the graphics or the surface details of the game are trying to tell you these people are not human. Like they are literally aliens, robots. mechanically augmented humans, artificial intelligences. Superficially, it says these are non-human others. But then as you follow the story and see how these people like take choices and make mistakes to protect themselves and get along, you kind of realize that the things that you were being told are not human actually are pretty human. And the people they are struggling against, evil corporate overlords who might be presented as like pure unmodified humans, but also extremely wealthy, those people who are coded as human are kind of like just a fleshy facade for these oppressive systems, whether it's in Neo-Feud, the Illuminati, or the neo-feudal families and so on. This is just my sort of take on what it means for something to be cyberpunk.
In Blade Runner, that's kind of one of the things that gives the movie replay value, is the open question, which is never resolved, is Deckard Cain a replicant or is he human?
And if there was something at the beginning that just said one way or another whether he was a replicant or not, there would be less depth to the story for you to consider it both perspectives. So comment all these things but there's all sorts of indications that, even whether or not Deckard is a replicant, there's other ones that are definitely replicants, but you definitely still come to see them as humans. And that's a common trope in all these things. So how does this relate back to Neo-Feud? Well, remember this tweet that Chris had. My parents and my parents' parents have lived in poverty-stricken area of Kalihi Palama, teaching for the kids and dancing the fake plastic hula for the profit of mostly white and foreign millionaires and billionaires of Hawaii. I'm a third-generation neo-feudal serf. Neo-Feud is the name of his game. So he's referencing this idea of what did his friends do growing up? Well, they put on these like simplified costumes that have the graphics that convince the audience, look how primitive we are. We don't have normal clothes. And then, they use their phone and Facebook to do whatever after work, but they like perform a version of like not being included in the normal society for people like Mark Zuckerberg here, who's literally buying up their land, which in some of these indigenous methodologies is more like family. Like you can't just like buy up somebody's mother. But that's what Zuck is doing. And then he goes around and sells you this metaverse thing where we can all, this is cyberpunk. And in the spirit of Chris's games, poking fun at these, using some dark comedy, I'll share with you this one tweet that doesn't put Zuckerberg in the best light, but it's funny. So this person says, his face after he says connecting people makes me scream.
Important experience of all. Connecting with people. Connecting with people.
I just couldn't help doing that after saying like the way they are the fleshy facade of the oppressive system. Anyway, I'm just having fun with it. It's okay to punch up to a gazillionaire.
I don't know if it was a reference to the metaverse, but I just saw a tweet that said that you should be animating the lower eyelids when people blink. And
it's like, well, maybe their reference model doesn't animate those. Anyway, enough of that stuff. This is cyberpunk dystopia become real. And many of the things that Chris says about Hawaii, here in Santa Cruz, another beach resort town with surfing influences, we have extreme wealth disparities and so on, and we have indigenous people and so on. Some other time I'll talk about games of the Ohlone people, but I didn't have time to shove it into this lecture. Okay, enough of the Zuck. Let's continue. So if you ask another artist, like, oh, what medium do you work in? You might say, oh, I do mostly like charcoal and paper. That's what I've got really good at the technique there. For Chris, point and click adventures are his medium of choice and all the things that get plugged into him. But importantly, it's a computational medium. He makes the choices in the story have meaning by attaching like variables that hold some data in them, even really simple data like 1 bit, yes or no. Did you already do this? Did you already look at the cabinets? Did you already check for mold? Did you look at their batteries and their solar tree? Have you talked to them about drugs as you go to your investigation of other places? And if you don't already have this achievement, play achievement unlocked thing at some point. So telling stories through point and click things is trying to communicate through the message of a compute-based medium. That's why we call our department here computational media. And this is more code from that thing. Let me see if I can share it properly. I have, like, in another window, like all the code for that particular scene here. It's not going to ruin the story because the story is also on YouTube, but there's more than just like the 12 lines that I've showed you.
Oh, it even has the little delete me testing on line 32.
Yeah. So, and he's like, oh, why are you showing people my code? It's like, no, this is how it works. And I think Chris and other ones had this sort of do-it-yourself punk aesthetic, kind of lo-fi, I made it all myself, zines type stuff. So letting it hang out there. I really appreciate this. Okay, continuing on with the canned slides. Let's see. So when Chris, or I guess in the communities he's in, he is more often known just as Silverspook. What are the tools that he uses? So a couple nights ago, he was doing a music session where he was making some like parody of Evanescence with like, you know, politically charged lyrics that were really funny on his stream while I was asking questions in chat on Twitch. And so it sounds like almost all of his graphics and animation are done in Photoshop, but he'll go over to like Google Image to get a reference for like, what does a bridge look like? What does a robot arm look like? And then he'll paint the corresponding piece of those. From music, he says he mostly uses Ableton Live. He's got like a microphone and a guitar for doing some acoustic and vocal stuff. But he'll often, when he wants reference for a style of music, he'll go like find it on YouTube really quick to get an inspiration for it. And in this class, I say a lot like find reference materials. We've all got Google Images and YouTube and so on to get a reference point for what we're trying to make. The voice acting in his game, like I think he took his own voice and like lowered the pitch a little bit to do the voice acting for Carl Carbon. And I guess he got friends, and I haven't read the full credits for his game. It's mostly his game, but obviously not all the voices are his. I asked him about how he does the writing for his game. And he says, oh, I use Microsoft Word, a really old version, because now it's like a subscription service or something. And he writes most of the story in Microsoft Word, thinking about what will be the graphics on screen, but the graphics haven't been painted yet. So either partway through the making of the art or partway through the sort of conversion of the dialogue into game scripting code, he might decide to change up the joke or change the dialogue to refer to some art that he hadn't perceived of at the time that it was written. So in that sense, a bunch of the content of the game is being freshly created in the game scripting language. And how are all these assets put together? Well, they're all put together in this tool called Adventure Game Studio, which is not, it's as old as JavaScript, which is actually pretty old now. I think I have a slide just about it. So in this class, we talk about data languages like JSON, YAML, and TOML. Like, is Silverspook using these to create the data for his game? No, it's the tools that we mentioned here. The language he's using is called, I don't know if it's really even called that. It's just the scripting language of Adventure Game Studio. And it doesn't have the richest documentation for it because it's mostly similar to other languages. So there's not something that needs to explain the low-level syntax, because if you can read Lua and JavaScript, you can figure out this one as well. Where do we go? Oh, and just for reference, like, you know, why is it using JSON? Like, Adventure Game Studio is as old as JavaScript. The idea of JSON as a standalone representation language wasn't even a concept until like 2002, 2004 or whatever, but JavaScript itself came from 90 something. So, you know, forgive this tool for not knowing about these languages that were not invented yet. Maybe a modern Adventure Game Studio would use a language that you've heard of rather than AGS script. But ultimately, the differences between the languages are not very important. Another point of similarity between JavaScript and AGS script is that they were both put together extremely fast by somebody who just needed to throw together a scripting language as part of a larger graphical thing. It wasn't designed by a careful language designer to be a beautiful programming language. It was like, we need to let people customize stuff with script because our thing is mostly like, what is a web page? A web page is a point and click medium. Let's put a little bit of scripting in there. JavaScript and AGS script both fulfill that same role. AGS itself is written in a tangle of C and C++, I think, although it's an old project that's evolved over time. So from the perspective of this C and C++ program, this file that Silverspook gave me called neofeud silica's apartment.txt, I don't know if it's called .txt on his computer, that's just a data file that gets loaded like an image file or like a clip of voice acting. To the engine, it's just a data file, but to the author, to the person writing the story, it's a programming language. But it's also an authoring language where new jokes, new references, new gameplay mechanics are getting invented as he's writing it and playtesting with friends who don't understand something or can't figure something out. So it's kind of like where the game design is written in this language. Okay, so to not blabber forever about authoring Indigenous games, big picture here, for the people in the major associated with the class that I'm teaching right now, you're going to hear many stories in the future of people selling out to work at big media companies like Facebook or Meta, whatever it's called now, to work on someone else's watered down creative vision for an interactive experience maybe they don't even believe in. To counter that possible future for you, I offer you the story of Silverspook, who's one example of what it's like to work mostly free from artistic compromises on a game that's like close to his heart, that he really cares about, that he understands from top to bottom. He built it all himself. But you can imagine that this is not the safest way financially to pursue this kind of project. But I'm bothering to bring up his thing because there's so much I'm learning about other people in the world, in the United States, by kind of following the development of neofeud 2 and seeing all the building blocks in their roughened state as they're getting prepared. There's so much I'm learning and growing by learning about neofeud 2 that I have not learned at all about from other games that claim to be sort of called cyberpunk, such as the one that came out whenever it was, Cyberpunk 2077. So I'm glad that we have this weird global information ecosystem of Twitter and Twitch so that I can pop in on Silverspook's development process and learn more about Hawaii. So I want to see more stuff like this, but don't wait for me to learn it, for me to tell it back to you in a nice cleaned up lecture format. Please just go watch this interview panel with 4 Indigenous game developers talking about things from their own perspective. Strangely, the video only has like 50 views and we have 50 people in this class. So watch that if you want to know more about this stuff. Okay, some closing reminders. If you are in this class, I urge you to take your art seriously. Maybe right now you don't have the courage that, say, Brenda Romero has to make the Irish game, or maybe you don't feel like you have an important enough story to take that seriously. You can grow your courage in steps if you take your stuff seriously. If you don't have an important story to tell, maybe someone nearby has an important story to tell and they need help with the scripting. They need help with the art. They need help with the voice acting or something like that. You can be a part of their voice reaching a larger audience. Meanwhile, I should say your midterm exam and the P3 programming assignment are both due Thursday before class. You can turn in the programming assignment late, but the midterm will actually disappear at that cutoff. And finally, if you are that random person on the internet or watching this in the future, if you're interested in the way that we like mix technical and artistic stuff in this class you've only had a slice of, maybe check out our computational media programs here at UC Santa Cruz. But otherwise, we're at the last slide. So that is...
How do I check out more about computational media?
I'll Google it. I'll put in a link in a moment. But to keep this short, I'm going to turn off recording and then I'll just talk to Joelle some more. So thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Where's the stop button? There it is.